Coach Thibodaux has built a reputation of being harmful to his own players. His approach towards practice, work ethic, and minutes allocation has made people question his in-game decision, and in some instances, his sanity. Everyone likes a coach who has authority, but nobody likes when he runs your star player into the ground. This year, New York earned a much-deserved second seed, only to start the playoffs incomplete, and on top of everything, lost Josh Hart during the most important series in the recent history of the franchise. All of this made people point fingers at Coach Tibbs and his coaching style, so today we're breaking down his role in his players' injuries. To get the right perspective, we're turning back the clock and going back to when he was leading Chicago Bulls, being a head coach for the first time. For those of you who don't know the full story, at that time Derrick Rose was tearing the league apart, and just a season earlier he went to the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron and D-Wade. Some kind of regret for playing the part in ruining his career. Former Bulls players have said in podcasts he's not like other coaches when it comes to practice. They would be brutally physical at times, which many players didn't like, knowing their season could easily stretch to 90-plus games. However, there is another element to this story. Despite D. Rose spending an average of 35 minutes on the floor that season, what might have contributed to his ACL tear was the amount of force his knees were absorbing during landings. As we all know, his dunks were always intense and entered down the road. Let us know in the comments what you think about it. Anyways, this wasn't the only example of Thibodaux being too hard on his players. When he was assistant coach for the Celtics, they did improve, becoming the #1 defensive team in the league. But his stay was marked with so many smaller injuries over the season that it's probably good luck everyone remained healthy for the finals. He was also one of the people responsible for limiting Kobe's offense in 2008. So good for him. But the guy was a menace for the players. That was his first year helping Doc Rivers, so more time was needed to show the impact of his methods. KG went down with the knee injury next season, costing the Celtics the series against Orlando. It took Howard and the Magic 7 games to beat Boston without KG. If he was there, everyone knows Celtics win and probably earn another finals appearance. Next year, Kendrick Perkins has an ACL injury. Now, it may seem funny to you that we're bringing Perkins into this argument, but believe it or not, the guy could play once upon a time. He was really good during his time with Boston, so his injury will forever remain as one of the things that impacted the outcome of 2010 NBA Finals. It's not fair to say Thibs cost the Celtics a championship, but his impact on players' careers definitely puts a negative spotlight on everything he did over the last 20 years in the NBA. He didn't earn his reputation overnight, and who knows how many series could have ended differently if it wasn't for him wearing players down. Even Paul Pierce, who spent years working with him, criticized him for New York's injuries and expressed his discontent, which tells you a little about the way things were in Boston back in the day. The same thing continued in Minnesota when Thibodaux took over from 2016 to 2019. This time, he didn't screw them over with injuries, since there were only minor ones, but instead his roster decisions would still sting to this day if Wolves weren't this good right now. He came over, ended up last in the division, traded for Jimmy Butler next year. But it's not just that he made the trade, it's about who Minnesota had to give up. The trade involved Jimmy Butler to the Wolves for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and rights to Lauri Markkanen. This may not sound like too big of a deal today, but check this out. Despite Zach LaVine had the worst time in Chicago, he could have been a huge trade asset later on instead of giving him up for Jimmy, who stayed only for 1 year. Lauri Markkanen needs no explanation, as he would fit so good in an already talented Wolves squad. And on top of that, Thibs sent away Rubio to make room for Rose, which is nice if you think about it as a way of keeping him in the league, but not when it comes to looking after the organization's long-term interest. All of these signings were ultimately the main reason why he got fired. Adding Gibson and Deng to the roster was the drop that spilled the glass, and his tenure with Minnesota ended with only one first-round exit to show for it. New York Knicks were first to react and wave off the concerns following Thibodaux and signed him anyways. The first thing he did, bring Derrick Rose on board. Thibs did win Coach of the Year award that season, but that doesn't mean much now. The Knicks did have a promising start of the season, but things would start going south in January against the Heat. Randle suffered an awkward fall in the fourth quarter, dislocating his shoulder that would turn out to require surgery and end his season. Now, Randle's minutes were not so crazy at around 32 per game, but there's something that keeps popping up as illogical. What the hell was he doing in the game? The Knicks were up by 17 with around 4 minutes of playing time left, and Thibodaux had almost all of his starters on the floor. Randle is one of those players with a messy injury history, So coaches should avoid compromising his health when unnecessary. If you remember, he broke his leg as a Laker. So if you're a coach, you want him resting when your guys can win without him. New York had that game in the bag, but Thibs just did what he always does, and the result of that was Julius Randle out for the season. On the other hand, Bojan Bogdanovic's injury was just pure bad luck for the Knicks. When he was acquired in that trade with Detroit, everyone was so hyped about his impact, since he's one of the veteran shooters who could have really helped the team. He was more than decent, but unfortunately, age catches up with everyone, and his body couldn't withstand the collision with Batum in Game 4 against the Sixers. Maybe that blow would injure even a younger player, but bottom line is there was at least one injury that had nothing to do with Tom Thibodeau. But that seems to be the only one. Josh Hart averaged 44 minutes per game in these playoffs, played 2 48-minute games, and people wonder why he couldn't stay healthy. This was a recipe for disaster. No matter how much you need a certain player, you don't make one of your best guys play without any rest almost every game. As far as medicine and pro sports are concerned, Josh Hart is a phenom. There really isn't anything you could take against him, as both he and Brunson gave all they had. It was surprising that Hart didn't suffer a leg injury considering all that time spent on the floor. On the other hand, OG Anunoby didn't have that luck. His hamstring gave up against Indiana after averaging crazy 41 minutes per game in these playoffs. Thibs can't be unaware of this, and it's just ridiculous at this point. It is surprising no one in the organization steps up and talks to him about the issue, regardless of consequences. Nobody expect the Knicks to fire him, but something needs to be done about this. There's no debate New York could have made the Eastern Finals with everyone on the roster 100% healthy. It's fair to say every team will eventually struggle with injuries, but this is too much. Thibs is great, but the Knicks fans have been waiting for too long to be competitive in the playoffs again, and they'll let no coach ruin it for them. This isn't saying they should change Thibodeau, but they should change the way things are done when it comes to preserving players' health. Hopefully they bounce back from this and give us another playoffs run next year, with everyone healthy and ready to play. That's it for today, guys. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to tell us what you think of Coach Thibs' methods, and what moves do you think the Knicks will make in the offseason. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up with this year's playoffs. Peace out.